Oh god, why am I this big? What? Where am I? Oopsie. Yeah, I forgot to put it back after taking the Twitter picture. Anyway, hi. Hello. What's up? God, that's stupid. Okay. I generally didn't mean to do that. Hi. I have arts that I'm doing and I figured I'd stream. I'm not in a super talkative mood. Like, I don't have much to talk about, honestly. Nothing is going on. So, yeah. The mic is on, but I might not talk too much. Um, yeah. I just wanna draw and stream. I, well, more so, I wanted to draw and I figured I'd stream while I was doing that. Because why not? Yeah. I gotta align it and kind of figured it out. I don't know what I'm gonna do with the background. I don't know if I'm even gonna bother with a background. I don't know. I just wanted to draw something cool after a bit of a revelation happened in D&D. And so, yeah. Kinda wanted to do something a bit sharper. Kind of revelation. Oh, you know, the kind where you find out that you might be functionally immortal because an eldritch god has decided to make you a ticking time bomb for the end of the universe. But it's in like the shitty eldritch way, and also the character does not want it. That kind of revelation. Midlife crisis in the early 20s. Oh, yeah, a little bit. I mean, he is a half-elf, so it's like not even close. Not even close to a midlife crisis, but he's just having a general crisis. A local man has literally never caught a break his whole life. But yeah. Not entirely sure how much I trust it, but yeah, I feel like it's a safe assumption of, yeah, okay. Fun. A fun, it called a blessing, but it's not really a blessing, it's kind of blurst. Oops. Hand, god damn it. Zoom into like pixel territory. I prefer blurst to blessing, gotta have some spice in there. It's like one of the other characters, their blessing is to be able, from a different god, is to be able to use godly weapons, god-killing weapons, magical weapons, shit like that, even though they're not magical at all. And another one's is to be able to drink without fucking dying of alcohol poisoning. And meanwhile, poor Coda here is just like, you can't die even if you get beheaded. Have fun! Also, you might accidentally blow up the universe if you say a word. Like a single specific word. Have fun with that! Just like, what the fuck? Yeah, scary. Very scary. He's just kind of like, what? Why? He's not a particularly lucky guy. He's very much not a lucky person. Hi, Girlson. Hello. Yeah, Coda has a 0 in his luck points, I think. I know there's no actual luck stats in D&D, but if there were, he has none of it. It's at solid 0. Everything else he's at least okay at, but his luck points? None. Non-existent. I think I'd actually be banned from taking the lucky feat if I even thought of it, because it's just like, no. You don't have that. Just objectively unlucky. Luck when your character sheet is overruled by the luck of your dice. See, my dice rolls are actually pretty decent. Unfortunately, story-wise, Coda has none. Like, constantly bad shit happens to him all the time. It's not even funny, it's just like, it's just sad at this point. Local man literally cannot catch a fucking break. I'm also gonna be making up half of this shit in this one. I don't know. I didn't sketch some of it on different layers. I don't know why I sketched this in here, because he does not have... God. I don't know. I like how I have the adorable, fun little Animal Crossing music, and then I'm just drawing this dude getting fucking beheaded. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I don't really know what to do with them yet. It's just like, the more I think about it, the more questions I have, and the more I'm just like, oh god. That was not having this happen on his vacation. He has not had a vacation in his entire life. He just got his memories back, like, completely, right? And he found out, like, oh, the reason why I had to go through this traumatic experience of losing all of my memories and fundamentally not knowing who I was and having to just kind of walk about with it and deal with it on my own, aside from, like, these people who happen to actually be nice to me for once. The reason that happened was because I got framed for a genocide I didn't do. Because I was in shock and everyone just kind of... Like, he literally got beaten into giving a false confession. It's just like... Man! Framed for genocide kinda sucks. Yeah, it kinda does. Like, dude cannot catch a fucking break. Yay, police brutality. It wasn't even police, it was literally, like, other assassins. We're just like, fuck you. Like, not even the police, because he's from the Feywilds. They don't have police. Like, it was the Archfey that, like, sent him away because he couldn't give his own testimony. So... Oop, the dog just tried to break in. Like, man. Big courts are the worst. Just because he was in shock and he had to... he had to give false testimony because he was beaten into it. I would know, wouldn't I? Yeah, probably. I should, huh? One would think. If I didn't avoid all of my duties. Uh-huh. Just fucking rough, man. And then he follows that up immediately with, like, oh yeah, also you're immortal as long as you're not in the Feywilds. Because an eldritch god has decided that you are the harbinger of the end of the universe. Have fun! Poor guy has zero luck. It's always him that has this shit happen. A god has decided it likes you. Have fun, you poor thing. Isn't this like... He has 3 separate destruction-related gods on his ass. Who have all just collectively decided, this kid? Yeah. He's the one. And he's just like, I just wanna, like, I don't know, live? I just wanna chill. What the fuck? Now I'm reminded of a TV show with a normal everyman that has nonetheless destroyed 3 separate planets by accident. Yeah. There's like a specific word that Coda cannot say because if he says it, it will end the world. It's just like... Okay. Great. And unfortunately, it's like the one that what is that word? Fish stick? No, it's the word whore. And unfortunately, it's like, man, that's the funny one to say. It's like the funniest one to say. There is a reason that it's that word specifically, because the god that's blessed him with this is Ignanis, like the Eldritch god, and it's very obviously based off of the Lovecraftian version. I don't know to what extent, but like same list of things that she is a god of and everything. And so one of the aliases for Ignanis is the Infinite-Handed Whore, and that's why it's that word specifically, from what I can gather. I'm not surprised. But it's just like, okay. Take away the funniest thing to say when you're mad, great. The funniest insults. Reminds me of a book that I saw that looks to be an adaptation of Lovecraft himself, children's poetry. Oh, very fun. I have not read any Lovecraft, so I don't know too much about it, actually. But yeah, you know, super fun time. He's also been forcefully signed as, an envoy of the God of the Void, and also the Heat Death of the Universe. Which was already bad. Already not super great. But it was also Coda's gods anyway. Because that god happened to be the ones that assassins pray to. So it's like, okay, well that one at least makes sense. Not that he's gonna be happy about it. But, like, shit, dude. Rough day for Coda. Rough thing to just kind of have dumped on you when you kind of just wanted to clear your name and then ask some questions. And also your friend is about to leave. Because this was the same session as the the final session for another character being there. So in game, that character is going to school and they were having like a going away party later that day. Just like a lot to think about, man. And I think I'm gonna be thinking about this for a good while. It's just like, fuck. Oops. Turn all the way in. The hell? Has been causing horror for small children. Yep. Yippee! Fun times for Coda. Super fun. And I'm excited to explore his fucking thoughts about it when I get around to writing his journal entry for the day. Because, jeez. Like, he's not happy. He's also not, like, none of the other... all the other players are aware of it, right? They, like, we didn't go into a separate call or anything, but in character... Coda is the only one who knows about it. He has not told anyone, and he doesn't really want to, for understandable reasons, especially considering, like, they were basically in, like, a voice, they were basically FaceTiming, the Archfey, right? But they were in, like, a mage's guild to do it. And so, like, after that was done, they got fucking kicked out because the guy who was running the call was so fucking scared of Coda. Which does not help, because Coda is already just gonna be like... Fucking... Cool, I really am a monster, great. That's exactly what he needed. To add on to everything else. Bit awkward for that strand of hair. I don't like that tangent that causes. It also happens to be that this is the second time in-game that the idea of Coda being decapitated has been brought up as like a distinct thing, which is worrying. I'm scared. Even if you won't die from it, but... But it's like, he's probably not gonna tell many characters in game, if anyone. Like, it's just gonna be a traumatizing experience for everyone when it happens. Oop. I didn't do that on the right layer, but oh well. That's fine. Any favorite Coda stories? I'm not sure. Most of his stories are just extremely traumatic. Still playing this one, right? Yeah. This one's still going. And will be for a while. Or is this the one that's about to get retired? No, this one's gonna be going for a while. Taco is the one that's about to finish. I don't know. Most of Coda's stuff is just extremely traumatic, honestly. I think most of the... I mean, Coda does have, like, a comedic side to his character in that, because... I can't call him sheltered, because that's not what he is. It was more like he was completely isolated, from having a normal upbringing. So... He's very smart, but he has a lack of understanding about a lot of things. In the world. Like, he just doesn't know stuff because no one ever taught him, right? And so one of the big points of comedy with him is he... I suppose one of his major weak spots are animals, right? Because he never got taught a lot of the names for different animals. And, like, by the time he... Like, most of his context of experiencing animals has been in, like, I need to survive them by myself as a child because I've just been left here as a survival exercise in the woods, in the Feywilds. And so he has his own names for some stuff. Like wolves. Wolves are a big one. He's scared of wolves, but he does not call them wolves, and it has led to confusion on a couple of different occasions. Because he calls them woo-woos, and he kind of just refuses to learn the actual name for them. He's very set in it now. I love woo. I know. It's so funny. It's like a strangely cute side to him. Because honestly, he is kind of a kid at heart. He never really got to be a kid, so... He has a lot of childish behaviors, when he is comfortable enough to show them. But he's also... A lot of the comedy with him is how deadpan he is. He kind of has like a bit of a flat effect going, I suppose. Not fully, but like he can be very deadpan, essentially. And so we had like a fishing beach episode sort of thing. The session before last, and Casimir, who's the character who's going away, but he's a fisherman, and so he was like showing Coda how to use a rod. And he very specifically was like, you just do this and go wapow, while casting out the line, and then Coda interpreted that as like, oh, you have to say wapow while you do it. So it was just wapow. Every single time he cast that line out. Stuff like that. He has a lot of traumatic shit going on, but sometimes it's a little funny. Just the way he experiences the world and interprets things. Does it not have a semantic component? He probably assumed as much. Yeah. You're just like, yeah, it's definitely part of it, right? Like, otherwise you wouldn't have included it. He's a bit goofy. And also quite recently, like, he was in a good enough mood to actually go off a different side of his personality that wasn't horrifically depressed for a moment. In which he proceeded to take advantage of one of the other party members being a bit crazy, to fuck with him using message in the most fey humor kind of way. So, you know, he has a funny side to him. He has quite a few different sides to him, I think. Because he masks a lot of his feelings, so they come out in interesting ways. He's a little silly. He's a little silly guy when he's in a good mood. What have I been up to? Fuck all, honestly. Let's see. I was doing your character here commissions. Got those done as of today. Need to open other commissions. I'm trying out doing them in a more structured, like, I'm doing this specific kind of commission. So I think I'm gonna open up some illustration commissions next. I'm not sure. Sleeping a lot, honestly. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been doing that much. I went to see Spider-Verse on Friday. Then it's commissioned me for potential stream assets should I decide to stick with streaming thing. I mean, yeah, my commissions are technically open for, like, everything. It's just, like, I'm not advertising them because I wanna get, like, specific kinds of commissions. But they are open, like, just in general, so if you wanna, they're there. They probably won't be closing anytime soon, so. Heard good things about Spider-Verse. Yeah, it's really good. I kind of wish I hadn't spent the entire second half of the movie desperately needing the bathroom, but refusing to leave my seat. But you know, I managed to hold out, so. But it's definitely a good movie, and I need Beyond the Spider-Verse right now. I need it ASAP. Please. I'm sure it's gonna take a while, because I know Across the Spider-Verse is like an animation nightmare. Oh. But I do hope we get to see more, Obi and, Paviter, I think? Because I hope we get to see more of them. in Across and Beyond the Spider-Verse because I really enjoyed them. But I did find it interesting that the way they decided to do Across the Spider-Verse. Not to spoil anything, but it's essentially mostly setup, like, which is interesting. I don't think that's a bad thing. But it feels like it feels like a comic. The way a comic story is laid out. Whereas like you have multiple parts to it, so you're not gonna try and rush into certain parts of the story, and you're gonna take your fucking time. Set things up, which I really liked, because I feel like you don't get that. But it also, like, realizing that was kind of like a, oh no, they needed to split this up into different parts. Like, it's necessary. I understand why they decided to do that, and you know what, good for them. You know? Because it's like, this is already the longest animated movie, right? With the biggest crew. And it's adds more to the story. It was essentially like setting up for the third part, which makes me very excited for the third part, but it's also like, I need it. I need it now. But, you know. That's what fanfiction is for. True, true. I'm not a big reader of fanfiction, but yeah. Yeah. I am very much enjoying all of the fan art that's coming from it though. There's been a lot of really cool fan art, which I always like seeing. We do not degrade fan art here. It is a valued medium and there's a lot of very skilled artists. I'm just not a big reader of it. I just don't have enough time. And since a lot of them are shipping, like, unless... There has been media I have been... I have read fanfiction for some stuff. Like when I was really into Heaven Official's Blessing? Blink blink. I did read fanfiction for that one because that is romance and it was already so long. Like the story's already so fucking long. It's literally like 400 chapters, right? The original story. But I was still like, I need more. I need more. I need more of it. I need more of them, right? Give me more. So I did read fan art for that. I did read fanfiction for that when I was very into it. Same for Modazushi. Well, I wasn't as into Scum Villain though. Unfortunately. I don't know what it was about Scum Villain. I just couldn't get into it as much as MXTX's other novels, unfortunately. I didn't dislike it, but it did feel a bit weaker to me, I suppose. Story-wise. I don't know. But... yeah. I do understand why people enjoy fanfiction. I get it. There's... people do have some good writing in that. But I tend to stay more on the fan art side. For obvious reasons, I think. I do have a friend who, at least, I don't think they do it anymore, but they used to write fanfiction. I don't know, I don't know if they have any current social media, actually. 'Cause they left for a good while. But I don't know. I know she was thinking of getting back into cosplay. I think. You mentioned it the last time we talked. I don't know if she's actually, like, done anything with it. I'm gonna try and make this into one of his canon outfits. Not as difficult. But yeah. I do very much love fan works. I think a lot of people bring a lot of good ideas in. It's fun. I like the fan work is becoming more acceptable, I suppose. Maybe that's not the word. I don't know. Becoming more popular. It's becoming more separate from fandom. There we go. There's what I want to say. It's becoming more separate from fandom, where you don't have to be inside a fucking awful little space. Like, you can still enjoy fan works without being part of fandom. And I greatly enjoy that, because fandoms were fucking hell. Oh my god. Oh my god. They still are hell. They still suck. Fuck fandoms, honestly. Worst growing up experience. Fans aren't interesting. I like fan works. I don't love fandom. Because, here's the thing. I used to be part of the Danganronpa fandom, right? And that was fine while it was still niche. Anyway, if you know how the Danganronpa fandom ended up being, I stopped taking part in it for a reason. I was really into Persona Stairs of the Shishimizuna. You know what? No, actually, I think the guy who did that, genuinely kind of impressive. He's actually really good at papercraft. He's done some really cool, like, realistically sized paper sculptures of characters, and they are genuinely impressive. I cannot disparage this guy. It's a whole lot more dedication than I have, honestly. It is a little obsessive, but you know what? I think he has the rights. He does other stuff, he does a lot of paper stuff, and I think it's genuinely, like, quite impressive to have that level of dedication. I can't disparage the guy. Even if I do think it's a little cringy sometimes, but it's like, you know what? Be cringe and be free. It's your fucking house. Do what you want. Yeah. But, yeah, I used to be really into Persona, and then when Persona 5 came out, and, like, because before Persona 5 came out, like, it's not like Persona 3 and 4 were, like, super niche, but they were kind of niche, right? Like, they were not super duper massive. Like, if you looked up these games on, like, Tumblr, they did not have a fandom. Like, it was borderline non-existent. And I know this because I did it. And I couldn't find anyone. I found all of, like, 5 people. When Persona 5 came out, everything fucking changed and I hated it. Like, I'm glad it got more mainstream. But also, fuck the fandom that came out of it. Oh my god. Like, I had some nice interactions with some people within it. Like, I took part in a fanzine for it. It was like my first one. Honestly, those guys were pretty chill. They were cool. I had a decent experience, even if there was a little bit of disorganization. It was not the worst. It was not the most disorganized fanzine experience I've had. It was just like, there was like little things. But like, it was successful. It did well. You know what? It was a good experience. Oh boy, though. Like, especially after Royal came out, I feel like I have Royal, but I haven't played it, right? I don't know any of the Royal content, because I just have not gotten around to it. But oh my god, everything I saw that came out of the fandom after Royal came out, fuck that shit, bro. Oh my god. People became fucking rabid. The best part of exclusively reading webcomics, everything is rather niche. Right? I substantially prefer smaller communities. It's what I have realized about myself. I don't love fandoms. I like fan works, and sometimes I'll hop into them, but I won't take part, because it fucking sucks, bro. Like, there's some cool people that make cool things, and honestly, anything outside of that, I'm just gone. Like, I had a friend, there used to be, I don't think it's around anymore. I don't know if the account is still up. I don't think it's still going. I doubt it is. But I was friends with the person who had the Danganronpa V3 Confessions Instagram page. And the fucking bullshit I saw on that thing, that was kind of what sucked me out of Danganronpa. Because people were fucking insane and causing so much drama. And it was just like, fuck, man. Like, people were dicks. And I know it's because everyone was like fucking 15, right? Like, it was a whole bunch of 15-year-olds just, like, doing shit they shouldn't. But, like, some of that is just god-awful. Like, Danganronpa, like, thoroughly ruins my perception of fandoms. Which honestly, probably for the best. Probably for the best. I luckily never got sucked too deep into fandom drama, because I mostly just, like, made friends and then kept to that group. But even within, like, the friend groups I was in, like, you know how it is when you're a teenager, where it's like, every little argument you have is the fucking end of the world, right? Especially when, like, half of the people in the group have very obvious mental illness. Me included. Like, everyone's obviously, like, dealing with some shit. And so, every slight disagreement is the fucking end of the world. Everyone's toxic as shit when you're a teenager. And, you know, like, I feel like that is, like, a part of the teenager experience, right? But, oh my word. I'm still kind of friends with some of the people I was friends with back then. Like, I still have connections with some of them. I don't, like, talk to them one-on-one really anymore. Like, fuck, dude. Shit was weird. Like, I feel like fandom really exacerbated that part of being a teenager. Like, unsupervised teenagers thinking they're smart and understand the world. Who all have, like, the most toxic fucking behaviors, completely unchecked. While also trying to figure shit out for yourself. And, like, deal with school and whatever the hell else you have going on, man. Man. I don't miss the feelings of that. That shit sucked. It didn't help that, like, harassment was deemed as, like, okay back then. Like, whether people would admit it or not, people would harass the hell out of people for doing nothing, right? Like, fucking DeviantArt rants, right? If any of you remember that. Oh my god. That shit was fucked. Like, literally just harassing people for existing. Or for having an OC that people deemed as like a Mary Sue, and they would get harassed to shit. For no reason. And it was seen as okay as well. That's like the whack part. It's just, it was okay to do. Whether people would admit it or not. Like, it was... Like, people get harassed for, like, daring to draw anything vaguely sexual as well. Like, people were really prudish. Did we talk about something else? No. This is something I've been really interested in, like, recently, actually, as a topic. So I've been watching... Like, I was reminded of some of this shit. I think it's, like, wild. It's like, I never got affected by any of it directly. But, like, I watched DeviantArt rant when I was a kid. Like, looking back on a lot of it is fucking nuts. It's like, none of this was ever okay. Like, these people were just minding their fucking business. And, like, the amount of shit they would get for it. I mean, like, there was a bit of a point with, like, when it came to, like, fetish art on DeviantArt. Like, there was a point about, like, yeah, you should probably be putting the mature content filters on it. But also, like, I'm pretty sure a lot of these DeviantArt ranters would also have the setting to turn mature content filters off, like, turned on. So it's not like they would even know. Half the time, right? Like, they'd also just harass, like, kids. They'd harass, like, fucking 9-year-olds, basically. Like, they'd harass little kids who have slightly cringy Sonic art or whatever. Sonic fan OCs that they ship with Sonic. Like, the kid's not doing anything wrong. They're just a fucking kid. Of course they don't know how to write a character. Like, oh my god. That shit was just allowed. Gee. It's like, yeah, some of these kids traced. And they didn't credit, like, it's like, yeah, it's not good behavior, but like, they're kids. You don't have to harass them over it. Like, it's... thing. I feel like... because whenever I caught someone tracing... I think there was one time that I made, like, a public journal, but, like, no one saw it. But, like... nowadays especially, like, if I see someone tracing, I tell the original artist. And, like, I expect people to do the same for me. Like, just tell me so I know. And, like, you can't really do much about it most of the time nowadays. Off of, like, specific art sites. It's literally, like, I'm pretty sure DeviantArt had like specific reporting mechanisms for exactly that. So it's like, you don't need to harass them. You can just report it or tell the original artists. That's all it takes. Or just like nicely ask them in the comments like, hey, can you credit the person you trace this from? It's like, I've had people trace my stuff before. Well, like, they never did it maliciously, right? That's the funky thing. Because people practice by tracing. That's like an acceptable thing. Like, lots of people do it. And like, it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I remember this was on DeviantArt, but like someone messaged me being like, hey, I hope you don't mind, but I traced this drawing of yours because I wanted to practice line art and coloring, I think it was. Like, I'm not gonna post it publicly, but I just wanted to tell you and show you. And you know, I was just like, oh, cool. Sure, like, if you do end up posting it, just credit me, and, like, I don't care. Whatever, man. Like, it's just, it's such a non-issue. If it's not being used commercially. Like, obviously, if it's being sold, that's, like, a whole other thing. Like, if it's just a kid tracing someone's art, who cares? Fucking whatever, man. It's such a non-issue, and it was blown up so much back in ye old days when DeviantArt actually mattered. Before Eclipse. It's kind of wild to think about in hindsight, honestly. I don't know why I bothered drawing that finger, because I'm about to hide it behind a knife hilt. Like, I think the worst part of, like, a lot of that old DeviantArt drama shit was it was being led by grown-ass adults. Like, they knew their audience were mostly kids. I think the wackest part was, like, these grown-ass adults who were making these videos. Like, don't get me wrong, some of the people who were doing DeviantArt rants were definitely kids. Like, a lot of the bigger ones were full-ass grown adults. And they were complaining about people on DeviantArt, like, having this fetish art up and not putting filters on, while they were showing the full thing on their videos to their audience of mostly kids. Which is fucking insane to think about now. It's just like, oh my god. Fucking hypocrites. Or like, they barely censor it. Like, they barely censor, like, the full-on, like, act that is actually just porn. But they'd still show it. Like, they just censor parts of it. It was just like, but like, they'd show, like, oh, exactly where to go to get to it. Right? I was just like, what the fuck was wrong with you? Like, You cannot tell me you didn't know because they knew. They knew. They knew that a lot of the people on DeviantArt were kids. They knew that. They they said as much on so many different occasions in their videos. That was like the primary issue they were like using to leverage against the people they were harassing. And yet, like, you cannot tell me they didn't know that their audience was composed primarily of kids. It's just like, oh my god. Oh my god. Like, the realization of it. Like, you guys were exposing that content to kids while complaining about it. And I just... Like, well, I'd say, like, did none of them ever think to maybe just talk to the people who were posting the content? Of course they didn't care. They didn't actually give a shit. Like, they just wanted to make a quick buck off of it. They just wanted the clout of posting about it. Which is nuts in hindsight. And, like, obviously, like, when DeviantArt rants were a thing, like, obviously I wasn't aware because I was, like, fucking 14 or something when they were popular. Yes. That shit was fucked up. What's this? I need a drink. It occurred to me that this waist goes way too low. And also they was wearing, I sketched him in like the wrong pants for the outfit. Although I didn't really sketch the original outfit in the first place, so. Reading a comic now and I just got to a very interesting reveal. What comic? I'm not a major reader. I used to read a lot. What's Somnolus? Ooh. Interesting. What's it about? I used to read comics a lot more than I do now. I kind of just ran out of time for reading stuff. I want to get more into reading indie comics more so. I bought a few comic-y things at the last con I was at. There was some independent stuff. They're very small though. It's about a paladin and troublemaker and an inventor fucking up the multiverse. Love that. So cool. That's very fun. And also very much sounds about right. To give you some webcomic recommendations? Sure. I mean, if you just put that in the Discord. In a channel. I don't know which channel. Shit. Yeah. I'll try and make some time to check some of them out at some point. I do like... Yeah. I like, with cons, it depends on the con obviously, but a lot of them have been getting a lot more independent comic maker friendly, or independent art friendly in general, I suppose. Pre-multiverse, one of the worlds seems to run on toast. We love that. Toast power. Let's go. Complete with flying toasters. Nice. That's funny. But yeah, like, the con I went to a few months ago. Oh, I think I talked about it, like, on one of the last couple of streams. At least a little bit. That seemed really independent art friendly, actually. It kind of made me think like, huh, maybe if I sold at a con, I wouldn't have to like fully stock fan art. I could actually sell like independent stuff as well. Like, people are just buying shit. It's crazy. Because I had it in my head that like, at conventions, like people would mostly prioritize getting fan art. I suppose it depends on the convention though. Because I suspect like Comic-Cons, yeah. Okay, those probably would sell more fan art, which, you know, fair. Like, I noticed, like, at this specific con, maybe it's because it was held at my uni, and so because of the art school, like, people just generally enjoy the Artist Alley more, care more about, like, the getting of art itself. Or maybe it's just, like, people are just opening up to more independent work. I don't know. More personal work. Like, yeah, it seemed like a pretty even amount of, like, fan work and non-fan work were selling pretty well. If anything, I feel like I noticed, like, more, original work was selling, which is pretty cool. I like that shit. Like, I know I mostly got, original stuff, which was cool. Although I did get some fan stuff. Oh. Maybe it's kind of with the smaller popularity of being in like one fucking fandom and living and breathing it, I suppose. Maybe that's part of it. Oh, it was kind of interesting. I don't know if it was like that a few years ago or not, outside of Comic-Con, because I only ever went to Comic-Cons a few years ago, pre-pandemic, I mean. So, I don't know. I'm just laying it in black. Line it in red. A brighter red. That's good. To differentiate the line a little bit, I'll work the color. I feel like that's kind of cool without the white line. I don't know if the white line would really add much to it. No, I kind of like it with just the the blood stuff. I think that works quite well. I want it to pop more. I think that was kind of cool. And in the background, I'll make those little splotties a bit darker. Or wherever they are. I don't really know, to be honest. Boost that area scaling. Okay, well that's the line I'm on. How do I want to call this? What I don't know. I feel like I kind of want to run a filter on top of his usual colors. I don't do that very well. Okay. I have to see the whole time. Oh. Nope. Nuh-uh. Look at this. It'd be kind of cool. Run it with these colors, maybe. Kind of like these. I kind of like these. Okay. Gonna feel kind of slightly odd working with these colors. But it'll look fine when it's all together. I'm gonna try out doing this. I'm not used to using colors that are they're not their usual palette. Essentially. I want to try it out for this. Not sure. That's that'll work. So it does not look green right now. Yeah, that's definitely the color I'm supposed to be. It's very odd looking for the moment. looks so odd like this. Looks like a fine or the picture looks nice. The elf isn't doing too well, it looks like. No, he's not. When is he, though? Whatever. So weird seeing everything in this fucking. What? Feels wrong. Realized. Why not? Wasp in here. Wasp. Oh, wrong there. Yeah, it definitely feels weird having him in this palette. Not used to seeing him in red. Kinda wanna just put it back to his normal palette. But I wanna see what it looks like if I keep doing this. Red helps mask the blood. It might end up doing that. Although these reds are much duller. So lots and lots of blood. As one might expect if you're partially decapitated. It's kind of cool. I think it still pops, at the very least. If nothing else. To blend into. Take my phone off that charger. Don't be picky about it. need to put his knife in the palette too. See if I could just draw it from. I don't think it shares in the palette. It kind of might. It'd just be like these colors, I think. Oops. Oh no. Fucking layers though. Oh. I don't know how it ended up there. Okay. Being located. It's fine. I don't want to do like a torn papery sort of effect. Oh, that looks quite cool. I have darken it instead. Yeah, I like this. I'm gonna darken his skin a little bit just because it's so bright. It's so ridiculously bright. We'll keep it within the palette, but just a little bit. You do spark these too. You can barely see it on the stream itself. He has little sparkly. Sparkly freckles. Can't really see them though. Yeah, that'll work as a shading color. Oh. What is going on? Okay. Contradicting evidence. What? Okay, fucking rendering lag. Go up, I guess. Okay. Whatever. Don't see how that's my fault, OBS. I need that open. Don't do that. Trying to get this like kind of graphic-y, I guess. More graphic-y than my usual stuff. I don't know, I just want to try something a little different. I've been doing a lot of scenic illustrations recently. Sometimes it's okay to just put a character in the void. Character is allowed to stand in the void by themselves while shooting blood profusely out of their neck. Just girl boss things, you know? Still find my music choice for the stream a little funny. Given what I'm actually drawing. I don't know why I chose the Animal Crossing music. I guess I just kinda couldn't be bothered downloading new lo-fi loops or OST compilations. It does make for quite funny contrasts, I suppose. Shade the entire top of it, whatever. I think it looks better like that anyway. Looks a bit more freaked out, which you should be. I'm sure being beheaded is horrifically painful. Probably, if I had to guess. His hair gradient is always kind of a pain in the ass to shade. Jeez. Hey Pen, thanks for the raid. Welcome, welcome. Let me shout you out real quick. How was your stream? Yep. Ooh, Master Sunrise. I haven't gotten to play any of that. I wanted to get it when it came out. I didn't get around to it. It's been a minute since... Yeah, it has been a while. I mean, I wasn't streaming for like a solid 4 months there, just because I was so busy with uni. So, I've pretty much just started up streaming again, honestly. For real for that, yeah. It got to a point where, like, I started second semester, I was just like, nope, I can only handle one of these. And I kinda need to prioritize. But it's all over. I graduate in like a week. Oh, like 8 days or something like that. Congrats, thank you. I'm glad it's fucking over, honestly. I was dreading the end for a bit, and then the crunching to get shit done kind of got me like, okay, I'm done. I'm glad it's over now. Never again. Is this your drawing? It's looking real good. It's his, one of my D&D characters, Coda. We've had a revelation recently, that he may, probably be functionally immortal, which is not that great, actually. It's in, like, the Eldritch way. Playing D&D with your friends, yeah. I can't I can't go without it for more than like a couple of weeks. I think I'd just die, honestly. I'm so used to it now. Yeah. My other game is finishing up next week. It was supposed to be this week, but we got kicked out before we could finish. We could finish the final fight, so 1 more week. Used to be so consistent with everyone, but you finish school, go to jobs, busy, etc. Yeah. We kind of have it where it's like, if at least, like, 3 people plus the DM can make it, and there's nothing super important happening, like, it's fine. But, yeah. It is quite difficult with different schedules. We also have time zones to deal with, which is a lot. It's not too bad. Most of us, or, well, those of us from Europe are night owls anyway, so it's just kind of like, okay, whatever. It's fine. No, I want that to look sharp. I don't want fuzziness. Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult sometimes, but most of the time, it's kind of like, if there's a holiday that happens, because we run on a Sunday, so like most people aren't. Like, at best, people might have to leave early, you know? Whatever. Not too bad because of that, luckily. It'd definitely be. Catch you later, gotta head to work. Oh, have a good day at work. See ya. Thank you, thank you. Never mind. That might look cool, but didn't. I didn't think it would look. That might work. Mix it up a little bit. Oh! Yeah, I think that's how I think that's good. For the most part. That's a little highlight on the knife. That would probably be good. Clean some of that up a little bit. Oof. Don't look at shit close up, man. The closer you get, the less clean it looks. No, that is easy. Interesting. Okay. Right. Sure. Okay. Wow. Pretty much it, I suppose. I don't think I want to do anything else with it. Yeah. Fucking help him, this poor guy. Can't. That's fucking great. Alright. That's about it. Okay, here we go. I'm happy with that. So, yeah. Thank you for coming. If you came for a little bit or a lot of it, either way, I appreciate it. We out here, hopefully not getting decapitated. But I'm starting to worry. I'm starting to think it might happen with Coda. Whoa. Anyway, yeah. I don't know when I'll stream next. I'm pretty much just doing casual streaming at this point. So I'm not worrying about how often. Okay, I'm not worrying about how often I'm streaming. So, I stream when I stream. You guys will have to live with that. I refuse to make a schedule at this point. I refuse to schedule anything. I will stream when I stream. So, yeah, if you came for a little bit or a lot of it, either way, I appreciate it. I don't know if there's anyone to raid currently. Let me see. Let me see real quick. Oh god, do not. Do not. Not particularly. Okay. I think today I shall skip the raid. I can't be bothered to go find someone. So, yeah. Well, thank you for coming. I'll see you guys at some point, I guess. We'll see. Anyway, bye!